All right, welcome to Pass Me the Rock. I'm your host with the most, Jacob Cooperman, joined by the regional expert here, Jerry Sullivan. It's been a while since we recorded, Jerry.
Yep. Very happy to be back.
Yeah, we got a lot to get into today, but I figured we'd start off being that the most, I guess the biggest news in terms of proximity was that Alex Smith had announced his retirement on Instagram, probably not even about 15 minutes before we started this. So I figured we'd talk about that, and then in proxy to that, we could talk a little bit about Julian Edelman seemingly announcing his retirement. I know there are some conspiracy theories floating around that he might go over to Tampa, but we'll get into that in a second. Obviously, Alex Smith, if you know football, you know Alex Smith, and you know his return to glory. It seems like coming in on the 2020 season, had a lot of problems with his leg. His leg was essentially eaten alive by bacteria, and then he managed to kind of make it back. And to even play football at the highest level after something like that, you gotta give the man tons of praise. You know what I mean? Tons of praise, and just even though I'm sure the season didn't really go the way he would have wanted it to. I know he kind of aired some grievances with not feeling like he was at home with the organization and all that. I still think we as fans and him as an athlete should hold that near and dear to himself, near and dear to his heart. I mean that he was able to kind of make it back and play the way he played.
Yeah, I mean, like if you watch the hit that took him out, I think 2 years ago, it was ugly. His leg was turned in 15 different ways. He had tons and tons and dozens of surgeries on that leg. Like they were taking like muscles out of one area to put them in the other area. They basically created him a brand new calf. His story, just being able to come back from that is insane. The fact that he was able to lead them to the playoffs, even if they were 7-9, they made the playoffs either way. I know he didn't start the game because he was injured, but in the end, he made it back. But I think he had to be saved from himself at that point. Like he kept missing games during the season because that bad calf that they basically created for him kept acting up, and no team really wanted him. I think the writing had been on the wall for a while that like he was done. I thought he would never come back anyways. The fact that he came back and played the handful of games that he did is good enough. And I mean, he's had a solid overall career. I mean, he was the number one overall pick, started for 3 separate teams, kept all 3 teams relevant for a while. So, I mean, it stinks the way it ended because when he did go down with that injury, he could still play. And the only reason he got traded to Washington was because the Chiefs had a better guy named Mahomes. So I think that worked out for all parties. But I mean, unfortunately, when he went down, he could still play. Life's not fair, but he still had a solid career and he completed his goal of coming back. So
and not to make a joke, but there's only so much outrunning you could do from an injury like that, right?
Right.
Like, as you said, there was nagging injuries over the course of this. Well, not nagging injuries, but his injury was nagging him over the course of the season. I don't want to say I saw this coming, but when you have such, I mean, when they literally have to redesign your leg and graft your calf back together. I mean, honestly, if you're playing, especially you consider the sport that he's playing too, football, it's such a heavy contact sport. And the reason he got the injury in the first place was from a big hit. I don't know. To me, it was almost inescapable. So I'm glad, like you said, that he was able to play all that he did. And he's a very serviceable quarterback. So for him to come back the way he did, I think in itself he shouldn't be ashamed about retirement. I think he should give himself a pat on the back for even making it back to the league.
There's 100 reasons why he shouldn't have come back from that injury. I mean, like they nearly had to amputate the leg. It was so infected and broken, and like they nearly had to amputate it. Like the fact that like some people for that type of injury might not be able to walk again. So the fact that he was able to come back, like good enough. Like I got to be honest, if I had that type of leg injury and they were like, yeah, we might have to amputate this, and they saved that injury, no way I'm going back to the reason that thing. I mean, like it like the leg, like he got hit, but like the leg like buckled underneath before he even got hit. And then, oh God, it's ugly. But the fact that he was able to come back and, there's nothing to hold your head down about. Like you did what 99% of people wouldn't have been able or even wanted to. So good on you, I guess.
Yeah. And I hope he enjoys retirement, like I said. And I hope that, obviously, as you said, when you come back from an injury like that and you're playing football, I mean, doing retirement stuff like kayak, you see like Obama kayak and all that stuff, maintaining or doing like, everyday activities like that is not going to be an issue for him. So I don't see him kind of just falling down and kind of giving into this injury in retirement either. You know what I'm saying? I think, he stays active and he actually enjoys not having to worry about getting hit by a 350-pound lineman every single
Exactly.
day. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is probably, he'll probably sit there and be like, oh, well, cool. I get to retire. And again, I don't have to worry about someone crushing my leg, re-aggravating the injury, and then actually having to amputate it. I'm sure he'll
And
just spend time with his family in non-threatening ways.
that's exactly what I was gonna say. I'm pretty sure he has a wife and kids. Like you want to
Yeah.
be able, like you want to be able to not be in a wheelchair for the rest of your life, especially when you have a wife and kids. Like you want to be able to run around and play with your kids. So the fact that like enough, this is it. Like you accomplished your goal. You came back, but at the same time, like you're not going to win an MVP. You're not going to be the starting quarterback of a
No.
Super Bowl team. So like you've accomplished what you needed to accomplish. So now you move on. You move on to the next chapter.
Yeah, I will say though, if he's gonna be like playing with his kids in the driveway and they do that thing where they kind of try to chase you with the electric car, I mean that's got to be a little bit for him. That's probably a little bit
Yeah, I
concerning.
wouldn't recommend doing that.
Yeah, like he has like a little bit of PTSD. He's he like gets out of the way of the car. But no, I think all jokes aside, I'm happy for the guy. Like I said, it's I think that demonstrates a warrior's spirit, if nothing else.
The one of the most powerful things I've ever seen was ESPN did like an E60 on his leg injury, and like it totally changed the way like I look at injuries for these athletes. Cause like, I mean, you were already concerned about it, but like the not just the physical, but the mental wear and tear of these rehabs. Like you think about it, it was 2 calendar years of rehab between him getting hurt and him playing in an NFL game again. Just 2 calendar years of things like getting your leg recreated, learning how to walk again, and like trying to
Yeah.
get over the mental block of being concerned about, getting hurt again. And like it just, that ESPN piece, it was powerful. And again, like it kind of makes you rethink. Like obviously, like when an athlete gets hurt, like you don't ever want to see anybody get hurt, but especially like major injuries like this, you kind of forget that there's a human on the other end of it that's dealing with, again, like I said, like the mental stress of trying to just come back and be yourself again.
And you've seen guys fold from less too.
Mm-hmm.
That's another important thing. As you said, the man wasn't sure if he was going to be able to walk again. And there was that whole issue with bacteria after the surgery. I know you remember that too, eating at his legs. So it seemed like just one thing after another. So yeah, I mean, I can't even imagine like the mental strength that took. Again, as you said, to not only be able to walk, get to the point where you're walking again, and then go back into the gridiron where you got that injury in the first place and say, hey, I'm willing to strap up under center and really go out there and be for this. I mean, just hats off to the man. That's got to be, that's difficult. That's difficult for sure.
Yeah, great comeback, great story. One that you'll probably remember for a while.
Yeah. Now we want to move on real quick. We got a little bit of time left here before we want to move on to our next topic here, but we got to talk a little bit because I know you're a Patriots fan, Jerry, and I'm just an overall Julian Edelman fan, being that he's one of the most prominent Jewish athletes out there at the moment. I guess now that he's retired, he's kind of out of the game a little bit, but he did announce his retirement it was
last week. Yeah. Last Monday or Tuesday.
Yeah. Last Monday or Tuesday. You kind of had sent me it over Instagram or we had both seen it at the same time, immediately texted each other. And it's just like, man, like a storied career. I do think, I think you should get into the Hall of Fame because I tend to think with the Hall of Fame, it's like, I enjoyed the story of players more so than I guess, accolades definitely have to play into that conversation. But for me, Julian Edelman is a guy, and I'm not just biased because I am Jewish, but the man, I mean, if you look at his story from D3 to Super Bowl champion, I mean, that's a hell of a story. He has a great personality. He always kind of sticks. The reason I like him so much is because he tends to stick his neck out for the Jewish community when other athletes, say Deshaun Jackson or again, Myers Leonard might, I don't want to say go against us, but they have a public, what could be perceived as a public anti-Semitic comment or in the case of Deshaun Jackson, if you quote Hitler, I mean, he's always been a very, he's been a very fair person. So I always appreciate Julian Edelman for both the career that he's had and I guess his conduct off the field. So it was very sad to me to see that, again, another guy with leg issues, obviously not to the severity of Alex Smith, but a guy with leg issues nonetheless. And the way that, you were talking about with the way that he played kind of lended itself to his injury, having to retire and calling it a career. But nonetheless, a hell of a career. So yeah, I want to kind of congratulate him on a hell of a career and staying true to the Patriots. It's not, I don't want to say it's not common, but it's definitely less common than it used to be now in sports, where you see guys stick around with a team and kind of become one of the mainstays in
Mhm.
personality and in on field presence. So congratulations.
When you talk about like, excuse me, when you talk about like the ultimate patriots, like people that take like that team first mentality, like Julian Edelman in college was a quarterback, but was drafted in
Yeah.
the seventh round as a wide receiver. He didn't really stick as a wide receiver for the first couple of years of his career. Like he returned kicks, he returned punts. They had him at like linebacker, they had him at cornerback. He was making tackles, and then he finally was able to. When Welker left, he was finally able to get a spot, and he never looked back. But like, I agree with you. I do think he is a Hall of Famer. In my personal opinion, I don't think he'll get in because the regular season numbers aren't there. But he's a Hall of Famer in my book because I feel like you're leaving out an entire chapter of NFL history if you leave him out.
Right.
I put this out there last week. I'm just gonna read some stuff. Julian Edelman in the NFL playoffs is second all time in receptions. Only Jerry Rice has more. In receiving yards, he's
Yeah.
second all time in playoff receiving yards. Only Jerry Rice has more. He's a 3-time Super Bowl champion. He won a Super Bowl MVP. He was big in every single playoff game he ever played. Like the Patriots have a very difficult time winning those second 3 Super Bowls without him. Like when you think about that game-winning touchdown in the Seattle game, that awesome catch in that Atlanta game, he won Super Bowl MVP, the last one. I mean, I get that the receiving numbers in the regular season aren't there compared to guys who, that are on the outside looking into the Hall of Fame also. But I mean, when it comes to playoffs, the guy was just nails every single time he needed him. He bailed Brady out a few times, especially that one Atlanta throw. And
Yeah.
like you said, the guy, he's an awesome dude. He's the ultimate Patriot, 7th round quarterback in college, turned to one of the greatest players for one of the greatest NFL franchises, if not the greatest.
Listen, listen. Also, if we're gonna talk the Hall of Fame, let's just say the Hall of Fame argument for Julian Edelman. I feel like you said he's the ultimate Patriot, not only in numbers, but just in giving that team an identity, right? Like what's a common joke about the Patriots? White receivers, right? Julian Edelman is the number one white receiver, or was the number one white receiver on the Patriots. I mean, he was he was the go-to white receiver on that. I think he gave them such an identity, obviously alongside Brady and alongside Belichick and some of the historic defenses they had and some of the historic wide receivers they had. I mean, he's got to go down in the history books as one of the best. I don't want to say in terms of numbers, but if I think Patriots, I'm going to go ahead and think Tom Brady first. I'm going to go ahead and think Belichick second. You could kind of realign those first two, but third, I'm going. It's just like that's my personal, and that's not my bias as a Jewish man. That's just from a sports fan's perspective. That man gave that team part of its identity. I think he's a mainstay in that system. So that's personally why I would that's part of the reason I would give him the Hall of Fame nod. Is I think that players that give not only their respective teams but also the league a little bit of extra identity, I think those people are invaluable, and I think you got to give them at least a nod in that position. That's me personally.
And Julian Edelman's don't grow on trees. Like
Yeah.
when you talk about, like I said, like he's the ultimate Patriot. Like in the early 2000s when the Patriots won their first 3 Super Bowls, they had Troy Brown, who he would play receiver, he would play corner. He, like, again, same guy. Like whatever you needed at him, you would get. Like those types of guys don't grow on trees. And every time you needed Julian Edelman to do anything for you, he would do it. And like he said in the video, like he's always said, like when the wheels, like he'd play until the wheels came off, and the wheels came off. He physically could not play anymore. It's not a Gronk thing where Gronk retired because he could have played. Like at the time, he's like, I could keep playing, but like I don't want to keep getting hurt. Like
Right.
Edelman physically just couldn't do it anymore, and like that's fine. Like you don't want a guy going out there and being miserable at this point. Like you don't want like a David Wright situation where like every year you're like, is he coming back? He's coming back, and it's this 5-year comeback just so he could play
Right.
one more game. When the wheels came off, the wheels came off. He accepted it, and it was over. And
That's why I also don't really like the idea of him going to Tampa all that much.
I don't
A
think
lot
it
of people are
happens.
talking about him pulling a Gronk, resuiting up with Brady over in Tampa. I think you just let him retire, let him rest. I do envision a kind of post career maybe Jewish advocacy kind of speaking, maybe go to a few keynotes type of career for him. I really do, because that's what he's been for us using his platform as an athlete. So I envision him kind of becoming more steeped, more obviously more steeped than he is being a Jewish man, but being more steeped in that kind of Jewish advocacy community. Because I think that's something that we need as a humanity, as a culture. But I won't get it too much into that. But I think you let the man lie, and like you said, the wheels are off. Just let him rest, let him enjoy his retirement, and let him speak his mind, because he's a very articulate and intelligent gentleman, and it's something that I've always really, really admired him for.
I was gonna say post career, I could see him. I could see him being like an assistant somewhere. Like I don't think he's like a head coach guy, but I could see him like as like an assistant, like a wide receivers coach or something like that. But I could also see
Yeah,
him
that too.
like doing like a media type
Yeah.
thing, because he is a charismatic guy. He's funny. People like him. Like you said, people listen when he talks. But yeah, so I could see him doing like his own like podcast or radio show or something like that. But yeah, I mean,
Oh
like I
yeah.
think
Yeah.
I think like he'll be there in post career, because I also just don't think that he's the type of guy that could just sit around and do nothing. Like I think he needs to get up and do something.
No.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so I could see him going one of those two routes. So yeah, we'll see what happens. But again, great career. I think he's a Hall of Famer. I don't think he gets in, but if it were me, if it were my decision, which it never will be, but if it were my decision, I would put him in. So
He'll be a pass me the rock Hall of Famer certified. We're just gonna open up our own ballot system.
and he'll be a Patriots Hall of Famer, and that's all that matters.
Yeah. I mean, also, just real quick before we move on here to the next segment, I think Patriots fans, you guys are very unique in the pride that you have for your team. Because you're one of those fan bases that were obviously around way before the dynasty that a lot of people think of now. And you stuck around for that. You stuck around for the mediocrity, and you stayed through the success, and you guys have always supported your team. Obviously, there are a lot of other fan bases like that, but I think the support that you guys offer, obviously the team now, because you guys are compared to what you were doing before, aren't really doing too well. You guys still managed to hang in there and support your current players, your former players. I must say that the Patriots fan base is a very, I used to think differently about them, but I've come to realize that you guys are a very dedicated and very kind of prideful, and it's almost the fan base is run almost like the organization is, where there's a code there, a code of pride. So that's something that I've noticed. I don't think he'll be, I think he'll be supported very well in retirement. Like you said, if he wants to go into media, whatever it is, I think, you know, he's loved and he's supported, and no Patriots fan is gonna let that man's legacy die. You understand?
Yeah, that's actually one more note about Edelman. You said he's a top 3 Patriot of all time. I don't necessarily hold him in that. I think, he's one of the best, but I'd put a few guys ahead of him before I'd put him up there. But like, I've been hammering home, like he's in a different type of legacy for me, where it was like every time you needed him, he showed up. He never complained. He was the toughest
Yeah.
guy on the field every time he took the field. And when you needed him to be the best player on the field, he was the best player on the field.
Yeah, no, I didn't
So
necessarily say that he was top 3 all time. I just said when I think of the Patriots right now, obviously I'm a Giants fan, so I don't have the history with the team that you do. But I when I think of Patriots right now in my head, I think that those are my
he's one of
three
the
guys.
first guys off the list. Yeah.
Yeah, that's just what I meant by that.
Yeah.
My fault. Go ahead.
No. Yeah. But I mean, yeah, like, just rounding off the point, he's definitely a franchise icon, and his presence will definitely be missed no matter what.
100%, man. 100%. All right. Do you want to move on to this Jake Paul versus Ben Askren? Can I call it a circus match? Let's call it a circus match. I want to talk about your opinion on it. I know you paid for it. I have my sources. I streamed it. I don't want to say illegally, but I did stream it. Um, I know a lot of people wanted their money back, and even the people that that illegally streamed it wanted their money back. I saw a lot of people talking about that. Obviously, the main event didn't really last too long. Jake Paul hit him with a devastating overhand right, sent Muffin Man to the canvas. I don't know. I wanted your opinion on it first, and then I'll get into why I think this is actually the best route for Jake Paul to, I guess, let's just say a pro career in boxing, which seems like it's what he wants to do.
I don't necessarily regret buying it, but it was kind of, I mean, yeah, circus is probably the best way to describe it. I mean, there was 4 fights on the card, plus a slap boxing match.
Yep.
plus like
Doja
15
Cat.
different concerts. Like,
Right.
I mean, like they kicked it off with the one concert, and I was like, all right, that's kind of cool, but let's get into the fights. And then they had the one fight, and then there was like 3 or 4 concerts in between, and then they have a couple of fights, and I'm like, all right, we're done. And then Justin Bieber's up there, and it's like, I don't want all this. And then all
Right.
of that for a fight that lasted what, 45 seconds, and like
Yes.
I'm not sure Aspen through the fight or whatever. Like, there's that shot of him walking down the tunnel with a giant smile on his face after he just got embarrassed in front of millions. I mean, he got a big payday out of it. So I'm not going to say he threw the fight necessarily, but like, as you said, it was a circus. There wasn't enough balance between the entertainment and the fighting. Like maybe have a concert to kick it off, and then maybe a concert like halfway in just to mix things up a little bit. But like, yeah, like you said, circus. And you had Snoop Dogg and Pete
Right.
Davidson and the Demille. And it's like you don't need all this. Like I didn't buy the fight for this. Like it took too long, and it didn't end like the final. It didn't start until like what, the Jake Paul fight didn't start until like what, 1 o'clock, and the thing
1 o'clock,
kicked off at 9.
12:45, something like that. Yeah, dude. Here's the thing, right? I agree with you. I think if they can figure out, can we call this a genre of events? Because the first one, I believe, this was predicated obviously by Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones Jr.
Yeah, and then
It
you
was
had
under the
Logan
same
Paul and
umbrella.
KSI, and yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So with all these events, I think we're obviously going to see more to come, as it was shown by this event and the Mike Tyson one previously, that these events can be extremely profitable. I think they just need to figure out a really, really solid mixture between, like you said, like the Justin Bieber concerts, the Doja Cat. I don't know why they had. I mean, I enjoyed all the personalities there. Pete Davidson was there. I love when Ric Flair came out and he was, he was walking down the track like, woo,
yeah,
like that was hilarious. But to see a slapboxing event that I really couldn't care less about when I'm just there to watch the fights. By the way, fights were fine. Fights were pretty good for an amateur event. I mean, in my personal opinion, it wasn't a snooze fest. I watched Frank Mir and I watched Jake Paul versus Ben Askren. So I didn't catch some of the earlier ones, but the ones that I saw were very decent. I just think they need to find a much better mixture of probably more predominantly, obviously, fighting rather than what we saw during that event, which was predominantly performances and a little bit of fighting. I think they just need to flip the scripts. It's okay to have those personalities in there. I thought Snoop was great on commentary, but you just need to tweak some things about the system. And I think going forward, you could have more events like the Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones Jr. one, which I think was a better mixture of all that. I think if they get that down, I'll sign up to watch all these, because it's a spectacle, but it's a spectacle that people want to pay to watch. I mean, people want to pay to see Jake Paul lose. People want to see if he can knock out UFC fighters, athletes. I think it's a great idea. I think the execution is where they just need to
right.
work on. You know?
Right. What did you think of the guy? I can't remember his name. He was a nobody. He was one of the first fights, but the guy that faked getting hit in the groin area.
That's
What
right.
did you
Yeah, I
think of
did
that? The
catch
guy,
that fight too.
like it was a total whiff, and the guy faked it. We saw it on replay, and then he got stretchered off anyway. Like that was maybe the softest thing I've ever seen.
It was homie with the blue hair, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
It was that fight. Like I
Paul
can't.
Pierce did.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I wouldn't say that because Paul Pierce had a reason other than the one that he gave. But like, yeah, that was maybe the softest thing I've ever seen. I mean, like, did he forget that we see replays of this? And because it was called a low blow at first, and then they reversed it on replay. Like, did he forget that we could see that? Like, it wasn't even, the punch missed, and it was like his like upper ribs, like over here. Like, it was nowhere close to where he was claiming to get hit. Like that
Usually
was, I've never seen that before.
Usually with liver shots, it tends to be right below the rib. So at first, when I saw the replay, I understood that it wasn't a groin hit or anything, like a low blow to the cup area. And my next obvious reaction to that was that, oh, okay, he got caught in the liver. Which for anyone that has been, because I've had the displeasure of getting hit with a liver shot, your body kind of shuts down, and you, similar to the way the gentleman did, kind of collapse onto the ground. You tend to curl up into the fetal position, and your body seizes up. It's extremely painful. So I thought that might have been what happened. But upon looking, on a slower replay of the hit, it doesn't even look like it really it doesn't look like it's a stabbing hit. It kind of looks like it just grazed and barely even touched him. So I'm not sure if that guy got nervous under the lights and just wanted to, get out of there. Maybe just, I don't know if, did they give him the win? I can't even remember.
The guy, no, he lost. The other guy won. But like, I mean, like he was losing the entire time. Like, unless he turned around and knocked out the guy, he was gonna end up losing the fight. So
Right.
maybe he thought that like he could get it off of this. I don't know. But I mean, yeah. And if it ended up being that he got a liver shot, that's fine. But like where he was holding, where he was claiming to get hit, that's not at all.
Yeah, I don't know. It seemed very.
It
The
was weird. It was
entire
a bizarre
event.
thing. It was, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It was a broad statement of the whole night. Was that
It was,
one
yeah, like I said, it was
10-second
on
span
brand.
right there?
It was on brand with the event in question. I remember the guys that you were watching with, because obviously I'm at home, I'm in quarantine at the moment, but I was kind of texting you guys back and forth, and I think the consensus amongst everyone was that the commentary was weird. That guy going down was weird, right? The fights themselves were sometimes weird. The D'Amelio sisters were bringing out belts to people. The entire thing was just, there was a slap boxing match. Pete Davidson was filming it. Ric Flair was there. I think they need to just tune down the wildness of it, because at the end of the day, you're still watching competitive fighting. It's still supposed to be an organized sport environment. Sure, adding more entertainment to it is a good thing, because I think actually that's what boxing needs, is events like these to kind of get the general public interested again, because guys at the highest level, I mean, sure, you can name a few of them, maybe in the heavyweight division, or like your Canelos, your GGGs, but besides that, boxing at the moment, it doesn't have the draw that it used to. So I think events like these can definitely help, but you got to remember, you got to do something about the weirdness of these things.
Exactly. You got to remember what the main course is. Like it was to the point where there was so many concerts and whatever that it was kind of like, I'd rather just go to bed than finish watching this. Like the Jake Paul fight, it ended up being the main event, but for a while it was like, is this becoming an afterthought? Like another thing, like there's shows and concerts during sporting events all the time. Like this is nothing new, but like, it's never to the point where it becomes like the main event becomes the afterthought. And like, I don't know, when you have
Right.
all this build up in concerts and things like that like, I don't know. It's just, it was too much for me. I mean, the fight was like fine, but like at that point I was like, fine. Like I'd rather be quick and over so I can just move on with my life. I mean, to sum it up, like I didn't watch like the first half of this total thing. I opted to watch the Celtics game instead.
Yeah.
Like, that was
much more interesting.
Exactly.
Much more interesting. The whole thing with me is like, how many Super Bowl halftime shows are we going to see before there's an actual fight?
Exactly. That's basically what it was. It was 15 Super Bowl halftime shows.
And I like Doja Cat's performance. Like I said, I liked everything about this event in theory, right? You get your Justin Biebers, you got your Doja Cats and all those, interesting and entertaining people. Pete Davidson, he's a funny guy. Obviously, Ric Flair is a wrestling legend, and a legend if you know some of the stories from just his escapades outside of the ring. But again, you can't do that where it's people are paying money to watch it, and the total time. I'm gonna put an entertainment to boxing ratio on it. It shouldn't be 75-25.
Exactly.
And that's what it was. So they just got to figure it out, man. They'll be all right. I know there's whisperings about Mike Tyson fighting. I think it's his next opponent. There's been a little bit of static there. I'm not sure if they're going to actually end up going through with it, but it's supposedly, is it Evander Holyfield? It might be.
It might be. I know they got a couple of these, like basically like eye candies coming up. Like they got like Logan Paul is fighting Floyd, although that might not even happen anymore, but Floyd Mayweather.
Yeah.
They got Oscar De La Hoya is coming back. So, I mean, they're trying to spice it up, but I feel like with these events now, if you're really trying to get people back into boxing, like I feel like you have to throw some of these big names that are like celebrities with the actual like GGGs and Canelos of the world, like try and bring people into what's actually happening in the boxing world versus what's happened. Because eventually you're going to run out of like old legends to throw out there.
Well, at some point there needs to be an intersection too. That's something else I wanted to say.
That's what I'm saying.
I completely agree with you. Yeah. You could have Guy Fieri box the Long Island Bagel Boss guy all you want,
right?
But at some point you're going to have to get him in there with like an Anthony Joshua to see the actual talent level of these gentlemen.
I'm not so much saying that. I'm saying like have like a mega fight between two actual current day boxers and that
Oh, okay.
have that be like a co-main with a celebrity event, because eventually, but like I know Anthony Joshua can knock out like like Jake Paul or whoever, like, but like I would like, if you're really trying to bring people in, you have to eventually incorporate what you're trying to get them to watch, you know?
Well, yeah, that's the other thing too. Is I wanted to ask you about this. So Jake Paul, right? Since he started his amateur boxing career, I don't think it's a pro career. I know they said he's 3-0 in the pros. This
Well,
is
he's
not
technically professional.
professional
He's making money off of it, right?
technically, but as a I'm not, I don't want to say I'm a boxing purist, but I think as a guy that
Right about
watches a
that.
bunch of combat sports, I don't I think the moment he becomes professional is when he will face an actual and I know Ben Askren is a professional fighter. I'm talking strictly boxing, right? I do, however, want to say that I love the trajectory. I know a lot of people are talking. I can't say that on air, but a lot of people are talking mess about the way his career started. I think it's actually the perfect career trajectory for him. Right? He starts with YouTubers. He moves on to a professional athlete, retired professional athlete, goes on to a pro MMA fighter that was a world champion. The next step should be an amateur boxer. Now I know in terms of press and getting this guy out there, it might not be the best move for these guys at Triller that are trying to promote these eye candy fights, as you so aptly called them. But I think that's the logical next step for Jake if he's really about what he's saying. If he wants to become pro at some point, you're gonna need to, like I said, you're gonna need to see how you stack up to first the amateur guys that maybe had a few regional fights under their belts or fight at the just below the professional level. You're gonna need to see how you stack up against them because I tend to think Jake Paul is talented. He's got power in his hands. He gets off balance a few times a fight, and he has some stuff he needs to work on. But the kid's got talent. I don't think anyone is refuting that. So I want to see him go and kind of get into that normal career trajectory. But I don't hate at all the way he's kind of ascended the ranks of going from his profession, it seems like, over to the boxing profession. Because what do you want the guy to do? Just drop like people are saying, oh, he should go up against amateur fighters and media. It's like, what do you want the guy to do? Just drop his profession, his prior fan base, and just say, all right, well, guys, I'll see you later. I'm just gonna go fight an amateur boxer. No, it's an interesting way to trailblaze getting into the boxing scene. So I do appreciate it for that, but I think now we have to see Jake Paul go up against the next step in competition, and for me, that's an amateur boxer.
Yeah, he's not bad at it. So there's that. But like, if his first fight was against this Askren guy, like who knows if he wins or not. But like you said, it's building up, like, because as he goes up, he's gonna take it more seriously. And eventually he's gonna hit his peak. He's not a world champion boxer for a reason, but he's not bad at it.
Yeah, no. He's definitely, I think he's got promise there, but I definitely want to see him now start to get more serious competition. And I'm sure there's a way for him to get more, obviously, like I said, more esteemed and more built up as he goes along, and to kind of have that draw still. Because I think Jake Paul in himself, he's a great promoter. He's a great self promoter. I mean, you watch because you want to see if he'll get knocked out or not, and he talks a bunch of mess before the fights. I don't think promoting him fighting a lesser known guy would be that hard of a deal. I don't think that Jake Paul suddenly, if he fights a guy, like I said, that's been in the amateur circuit or like the regional circuit, I don't think it should be that big of a deal to try to kind of to mark that to people, because people want to see his progression as well as him potentially fall. So I think that's the fight to make next. I think you gotta show what he can do and show off his chops.
1,000%.
Yeah. All right. You want to move on? Lastly, but not leastly, we can talk a little bit of NBA. I know you talked about the Celtics and Golden State Warriors game. We could get into that. We could get into anything really. We could talk about MVP. Any of that stuff. The season so far, I know a lot of people are talking about how it's a little bit lackluster. I kind of appreciate it just for the fact that we're seeing some wild top of the table teams coming back from when they were, a few years ago, like teams like the Suns and Brooklyn, kind of making a radical shift up to the radical shift up to the top of their respective conferences. So I do appreciate it for that, and I understand that it's obviously been marred a little bit by injuries, but it's definitely been a unique NBA season, but in its own way, it's been exciting.
I'll open it up with this question, because it's basically like the two heavy favorites to be in the finals are Brooklyn and LA. So I'll open it up with this.
Mhm.
Who do you think is more likely to not make it between Brooklyn and LA?
I think LA is far more consistent. I understand that Brooklyn's really, really talented, and obviously, it's crazy, by the way, that LaMarcus Aldridge, he just
Just
straight
retired,
up
yeah.
just retired. So I mean, they still got Blake Griffin though and DeAndre Jordan, so they'll be all right. I tend to think that they had a super team, obviously, far
Before
before
him.
LaMarcus ever came on the wagon. But you know, the statistic that I see people throwing around a lot, and it's something that I think a lot of people are kind of paying attention to, but not enough that they should, or not as much as they should, is the fact that their big three has only played 7 games together.
Yeah.
Um, and it's because of the injuries and Kyrie taking personal reasons. Who knows what Kyrie is doing really? I mean, personal reasons could be a whole bevy of things. He could be partying, could be going to visit family. I don't know. I don't tend to know. I don't care to know. The most consistent out of the big three and the guy that's been most consistently on the court for me, I think, is Harden. Um, and Harden's been I mean, he's been going insane. He's been having one of the best career years in terms of just assists and being a facilitator, and he's really kind of comfortably fell into that point guard role and getting guys the ball. So I think the one thing that the Nets need to worry about when making it to the final dance, and the reason I think the Lakers are more likely to make it and the Nets are more likely not to make it, if we're gonna have that discussion, is simply just worrying about injuries and consistency. I still think consistency is a little bit of an issue. I know that they really turned the wagon around from the beginning of the season when there was a lot of people talking about, me included, I will cop to that, how there was kind of a consistency issue and the guys were having trouble melding and
Defensively,
gelling and all that.
specifically.
Yeah, defense. So I think they actually did a great job of figuring out how to, instead of just running with three ISO guys that like to score, running plays and getting everyone the ball. Joe Harris is obviously a great spot up shooter, so they're getting the ball around a lot better now. And I think that's due to just Steve Nash getting much more accustomed to that system and the guys figuring out a system that works out for them too, so I just think it'll come down to consistency and injuries for the Nets. And I don't know, we'll have to see come finals time if they will have assembled that big three and how long that big three's played together.
I think they're both going to be fine, but I mean, kind of going with one of the other things you said, like health. I think health is really the only thing that stands in the way of these two teams. Durant got hurt again yesterday. Harden's been out for the last couple of weeks. Kyrie's been flaky. He's had injury problems his whole career. And for LA, AD and LeBron haven't played in what seems like 3 months. I mean, it hasn't been that long, but it seems like it's been forever since they've been on the floor. And we're kind of heading down the stretch of the season here. Like, it's April. Like, playoffs start next month. And the Lakers are the 5 seed in the West. So, it will be an uphill battle because they will have to visit other places. I know without fans, it won't be as much, but they will have to face a pretty tough team in the second round. They will have to face the top of the Western Conference team in the second round, which if they were the 1 or the 2 seed, they might not have had to face that quality of competition until the conference championship. So the Lakers, I don't think they're going to have any problems getting there, but if LeBron and AD aren't 100%, which, I mean, maybe if it were a different situation, they'd both be back already. I think they're trying to wait for them to get 100%, but if they're not 100% come playoff time, that could be a problem.
Yeah.
In the East, Brooklyn's number 2 right now. I just don't see a scenario in which any one of those other 2 teams, like Philly and Milwaukee, beat them over a course of a 7-game series. They have arguably 3 top 10 to 15 players in the league, depending on where you rank Kyrie. That's tough to match. There's nobody in the East that can even come close to that. They all have maybe 1 top 15 player, between Philly with Embiid and Milwaukee with Giannis. And other than that, there's really no team that's stuck out. It's really been those 3 teams. I mean, the Celtics have been back and forth. Miami's been back and forth. But other teams like that, you think the Knicks or the Hawks are legitimate threats to take those teams down? No. It's basically those 3 teams.
But I really do like Philly, though. I really do like Philly as a team that could potentially beat them over the course of a 7-game series. I think they play fluid basketball. every time I tune into a Philly game, it's always fun to watch. You have such a talented center in Embiid. You have spot up shooters. You have Ben Simmons, that's just a defensive mastermind, can cut to the basket. So over the course of a 7-game series, I'd give the next to the best award to probably Philly. I think Philly could give the Nets a real run for their money, especially if they have problems. Because the thing with the Nets is that they always go to these high point, these high scoring shootouts with teams. So I think that the key for a team to beat them, and it comes to, obviously, even in like a finals appearance, a West Coast team too, with a high-powered offense and a high-powered defense that can be consistent over a 7-game series. I think that's the key to beating the Nets.
I think so, if it were me, I would actually say that Milwaukee is the best matchup wise, because like Brooklyn's not going to have an answer for Embiid, but defensively, they're not going to have an answer for any of Brooklyn's 3 weapons. I think defensively, like when you look at the box with Giannis and Holiday and, Middleton and like matchup wise, like they have the guns to be able to at least keep up. Yeah. I don't know if Philly necessarily has that on the defensive end, because the bottom line is you're never going to get into a scoring battle with the Nets and win. Like if you want to beat the Nets, you got to get down and dirty, and you got to win ugly.
Yeah. You got to just hold the line defensively. I like what you said too. I mean, obviously the Bucks are a really, really solid defensive team, and I think offensively they've also kind of played a similar brand of basketball to the 76ers, where they're always fluid, they're always fun to watch. You can kick it out to open shooters, but you also have a guy like Giannis that can drive in, and he's just an unstoppable force in the paint. Obviously, Drew Holiday is one of the best defensive guards in the league. I mean, if there's a team that can stop the Nets, I'd say it's probably, like you said, Philly and the Bucks. However, I do also want to see how the Bucks do this year in the playoffs, because we might not even be having this conversation, because the only thing that gives me pause, and I might actually give it to the Bucks above the 76ers if it wasn't for the fact that in past years,
their history has been bad.
That the Bucks, that it's been horrible. It's been abhorrent. They've kind of fell apart in the playoffs.
Counterpoint, Philly is falling apart every year in the playoffs too.
That's also, listen, so we don't know. And also counterpoint, which is not really a counterpoint.
The Celtics are great in the playoffs every year.
But also we don't know how this Nets team is going to do because playoffs are a different beast. Like we've seen teams in the past, also to name the Bucks, that have had immaculate regular seasons and then they fall up. But like, we don't know how these 3 guys are going to play in the playoffs. Obviously, Harden in past years has fallen apart in the playoffs. KD and Kyrie have been fine, but we don't know. It's I mean, obviously, but we don't know how this team is going to look. We don't know how anything's going to look.
The only thing I could say is both Harden has had his issue in the playoffs, and I thought Harden would have an issue in general because he hasn't blended well with stars before. But KD and Kyrie have been here before. Kyrie has hit the biggest, one of the biggest shots in NBA history. KD has proven it that he can win championships with teams like this, and they both played with stars before. They both know what it takes to win with other mega stars on your team. I think to beat the Nets, you're going to have to rise to their occasion. Like you're going to have to rise to their level 4 times in 7 games. So we'll see. I think I don't know.
Play their game.
I'm leaning. This is the problem with me. The recent hot stretch too has me leaning towards me putting the Celtics back into the conversation of being a potential threat, but I still need to see more out of them too. Like if Kemba keeps playing the way he's playing and they stay healthy, then I'll put them in the conversation of being on that level, not necessarily totally on that level, but at least in the conversation of that. But I mean, like, it's kind of, I don't know. I feel like we're kind of booked for finals, but I would agree. I think LA has the better shot of missing it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's very interesting. Part of the thing I like about it, and we'll wrap up here in a second. Part of the thing I like about the season is, even though it's been marred by injury, there's been an essence of kind of almost like a wild card feel to this season, which I like. That's been introduced by all of this, is that you're not quite sure what's going to happen. And that's been kind of constant since the beginning, is like, because I do the podcast, I never know what to say. You know what I mean? Like, I never know if one player is going to go down, and then my prediction from the past episode is going to go out the window. So it's all very interesting to watch.
Yeah. And the whole play-in tournament, by the way, just one final thought, like the 7 versus 8 and then 9 versus 10 in the play. That makes no sense to me. You'd rather be the 9 seed than the 7 seed then. Like, you're playing the worst team if you're the 9 seed. Like
Yeah,
that makes
I don't.
no why
I
why
don't know.
why break it? Like it's a 72 game season, which I get is shorter, but is the difference between 72 and 82 really that much different? No.
No.
Like the best guess what? The 7, 8, 9, and 10 seeds, they're not going to win the finals anyways. So you might as well just knock out the 9 and 10 seeds right here.
Yeah, I'm not. I was watching it on TV. I was trying to understand it. I was like, I can't. I don't know, man. It's a single. Isn't it a single game elimination knockout
Well, it's
between the
like
9th, 10th, 7th, and 8th?
yeah, it's ridiculous. I like you're giving
It
this
doesn't
the
make any
10
sense.
you're giving the 9 and 10 seed an easier path to the playoffs than the 7 and 8 if you keep this format because the 7 and 8 play each other. They're not both going to be in. They play each other, and then 9 like who came up with that? I mean, who came up with this idea in general? But that specific playing format, like who thought that this would be fine?
I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't know. Well, that has been the show for today. We'll be back in the booth next week at this time. So it'll be Monday at 11. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. Leave us comments. Tell us what you want us to talk about. What, any, I don't know, any thoughts you might have, any critiques on the episode. Just let us know. And yeah, we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Congrats to Coop, COVID survivor.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Podcast
I was podcast. There you go. All right, guys. Peace.
All right, peace. All right.